So a pleasant good evening to everyone and welcome to Plenary 6 on Collaborative Leadership. Once again, we want to welcome every one of our participants and members of the online community for joining us for this global event. At this time, I want to welcome the moderator for the plenary on Collaborative Leadership, Ms. Musanda Mumba. But before she comes, we want to show a video by WWF.
Nature is not just a wild animal, a desktop wallpaper, or a holiday backdrop.
Alam tak terpisahkan dari kehidupan kita. Alam bukan hanya tentang masalah politik.
Asili ni msaada wetu wa kimaisha, mahali pa mapumziko, chanzo cha kila kitu tunachothamini.
Но мы перестали ценить ее. Мы уже потеряли большую ее часть, и ситуация лишь усугубляется.
La naturaleza nos pertenece a todos. Es nuestra responsabilidad compartida.
C'est notre gagne-pain, notre santé, notre eau potable, notre ciel bleu et notre économie.
प्रकृति हमारा आत्म सुख और खुशी है। ये अपरिहार्य है बेहतर भविष्य के लिए। हमें प्रकृति के साथ अपने रिश्ते को बदलना होगा।
大自然孕育了人类文明，我们是唯一可以想象未来并创造未来的物种。
كلنا لدينا القدرة على التأثير وتغيير طبيعتنا ومستقبلنا. الفرصة لتنفيذ ذلك الآن.
Devastating trend of biodiversity loss.
We must change our thinking on nature now.
We cannot let ourselves down. It starts with you and me.
Today, together.
Good afternoon. Great. For a minute, I thought there was no one in here. Fantastic. So we're back here again this evening as we begin to wrap up for the GLF these couple of days. Very exciting. I have a really, really amazing panel of individuals who are such leaders in their own right in terms of the work they've done on landscape. So I'd just like to call them up. If you can come up, please. But as they walk up, I want to mention that we're going to be using Slido, and I think you're all familiar with Slido. So, one of the questions that we're going to ask is, do you feel enabled to be a leader? Yes or no? Do you feel enabled to be a leader? From that video, we saw that we are so diverse, from the languages we speak, from the species we share, from the landscapes we live in, whether be it cities, be it close to forests, be it close to the sea, or be it in a desert. It really does demonstrate that our spaces are very diverse and really, really exciting. So from the very extreme right end, I have Plinio Sist, who's the director of CIRAD, Forest and Societies. And right next to him is Louise, who's the executive director of Organics International. Right after Louise is Alistair, who's from WWF and the Global Forest Practice Lead for WWF. And right next to Alistair is Jeremy, who is the Director of Marketing and Communication for FSC. And Rajan Kotru, who's the Regional Transboundary Program Lead for the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. And lastly, but not the least, is a lovely young lady, Dolores, who's the president of the International Forest Students Association. So if you can give them a round of applause. So, these individuals have been incredible leaders in their own right. I want to start with you, Plinio. You have worked in your organization and have created different collaborative efforts. How have these collaborations worked for you?
Well, for me, when you deal with research, and especially with a research institution like CIRAD, for a leader, I'm leading a research unit called Forests and Societies, gathering around 40 researchers. And for me, when I took the lead of this research unit, it was an evidence to set up collaborative leadership, because for me, it is evident that if you want to lead a team towards a common vision of what should be the research priority of your research unit, you need to share ideas, share opinion, and share a common vision. And these require quite of humility. You need to listen to people and question yourself that maybe your ideas are not the best, and that maybe the ideas of your colleagues are those that you should also lead and should defend. So this is not an easy exercise. Before I took the lead of this research unit, I was leading an international network gathering 18 institutions of research. It was a network of permanent sample plots looking at the dynamic of tropical forest after logging. And when I was leading this network, I decided to implement collaborative leadership, in a sense that we decided not to share raw data, but rather to share consolidated data, which means that we decided all together the research question we wanted to answer. We also decided together which kind of data analysis we wanted to do, and with which common methodology. Once we did that, each leader of each experimental site came back to home and made the data analysis, and then we share again the consolidated data and publish papers on a regional vision of forest dynamics after logging. So this was an interesting exercise that shows me that collaborative leadership is really something that strengthens your work, because once you have set up this, individual will work towards this common vision, and they will be much more efficient. If you don't do that, they will only act individually, and then it's going to be for you difficult to be efficient. So for me, collaborative leadership is really important and should be more widespread in the world, and especially in research and in landscape. But I guess we'll have more opportunity to explain why global collaborative leadership for landscape management is also a key issue.
Fantastic. Alistair, you work within a network organization, WWF, and as it were, networks tend to be complex and sometimes are not as complex as they are deemed to be. So how can you create broader and non-hierarchical networks, or, you know, how have you navigated this landscape in your work experience and without increasing complexity, so to say?
Thank you. I mean, I came from a similar background to Plenia, so I was working in forest ecology, and was kind of inspired by working in Malaysia 25 years ago, a long time ago, maybe 30 years ago, and seeing firsthand the impacts of deforestation onto the biodiversity and the microclimates and the rainforests that I was studying. So I found that very inspiring, and I think for me that personally inspires me. And as we're working with WWF now, and I've been in WWF a relatively short amount of time, a major thing that we've tried to do is to try and get a quite inspirational, ambitious vision for how we would like to see the world, particularly in my case, in forests. So we have very ambitious targets for WWF, aligned with the targets that the world has set with regards to halting deforestation, having half the world's forests protected or under improved management, and meeting the Bonn challenge, so 350 million hectares of forest landscapes restored. And having that as a very clear vision for the organization really helps our teams to be able to work together. And also, I think it can inspire them to really look at partnerships, because there's no way that we can achieve those goals as WWF on our own. So what I do as the leader of the forest practice is my job is to bring the knowledge from all the teams in WWF around the world. So there's lots of listening going on. Listening is very important. And then sharing that with the other leaders in wildlife or food or in freshwater, and coming together with coherent strategies and initiatives that we can use to then try and inspire our teams in WWF to have more impact against those big ambitious goals, and then also work with partners to be able to really achieve the impact that we want to see. So in that video, for example, that's us making a call to try and inspire and to try and get people motivated about a really ambitious target around stopping biodiversity loss. The world's come together on climate change and made the Paris Agreement with lots and lots of people coming together on a clear target around stopping climate change, 1.5 degrees. But we haven't really got that around biodiversity loss. The CBD hasn't really worked in that sense. So what we're calling for and what we're working on collaboration with is to get a really big global deal for nature, a new deal for people and nature that can inspire, get people thinking outside of their normal realms of thinking, to look at how we can take action collaboratively with lots of different actors, bringing in science, bringing in businesses, bringing in governments and consumers and people to really come together so that society can value nature more. So that kind of vision to inspire, I think, is really important. And given where we are with biodiversity loss, we just had our Living Planet report last month. In my lifetime, we've lost 60% of most vertebrate wildlife populations. And that's just shocking. I can't kind of comprehend how big that is. So if we can try and get that message across about how urgent this is, how dramatic the loss of biodiversity is, and try and get people inspired about that in the same way that people are being inspired personally by climate change, then we can start to really get collaborative action and collaborative partnerships to come together. And so that's, in a way, what we're trying to do with that video and what we're trying to do with our strategies going forward, is to really get the world to change the way it views nature, to value it more, and then be able to build a world where nature can really work with people, because people need nature as well, to be able to work forward.
Fantastic. I want to come back to Louise, who's sitting right next to you. Louise, you lead an amazing, amazing network of farmers and people really looking at organic farming. And just listening to the two gentlemen around forest landscape, we know for sure that actually the world is made mainly of small farmers who feed us, really. So what, in your experience, do you think is the most practical and tangible way to share knowledge?
Thank you for your question. Well, sharing knowledge and leadership, I think there are things that belong together. Just let me go back first to those small farmers you talked about, because I think they are leaders in themselves. And also think about collaboration, because what we do in organic agriculture is actually we collaborate with nature, we collaborate in the landscapes where agriculture takes place. And so those farmers that take the courage to transition to organic agriculture, they need to learn how to collaborate again in their own landscape and with their own communities. And most of them are also leaders in their communities and help others to transition to organic farming, to a way of farming that is in sync with nature and that fits the landscape where they're in. So if I think about learning knowledge, that's really the practical knowledge that the farmers do and the exchange that the farmers have among each other. But it's also knowledge on very much other levels. And what we are learning ourselves is that organic agriculture is not a language that many people speak. So we have to learn the language of others. And we have to learn that while we know that organic, for instance, helps to improve drinking water in certain landscape areas, we also then need to speak the language of the drinking water providers to say something. And then there's leadership and knowledge sharing on a more policy level. And so only recently, last month, together with FAO and the World Future Council, we awarded the best policies that are conducive for organic agriculture. And the winner of that policy is the state of Sikkim in India. And now as a follow-up, we want to invite all Himalaya states to come to Sikkim to learn from that experience and really have this Himalayan landscape, if you like, to be purely organic in 2030. So there's a lot of knowledge exchange that is needed and also happening on several levels. But then I think that's one appeal that I would have to all of us. If we think about knowledge sharing and being leaders, I think the most and foremost skill that we should have there is being open to change ourselves, because as we saw also in the video, there's so much change needed, and we expect that from others a lot of the time. And if we're honest to ourselves, do we have the courage to change our habits? I think that's one of the biggest things that is asked from us as leaders.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Louise. And really, we come now to the second question of the Slido, which I really want you to start punching in there, because we want to do a word cloud, an exciting word cloud. So the question is, what are the qualities of leadership that you would like to see more in the world? What are the qualities of leadership that you'd like to see more in the world? And I think Louise tapers very nicely in showing that small-scale farmers are actually leaders in themselves. And because you mentioned the Himalayas, I want to skip Jeremy and go to Rajan. You're from the Himalayan range, beautiful region. I have done some really exciting work there, and it's just mind-blowing, but very complex as well. Where do you see, in terms of the actual unspoken dynamics, in terms of how you navigate this landscape, these unspoken dynamics that keep us from collaborating? Do you think, how do you navigate that?
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. I think it's, first of all, we work in transboundary landscapes, not the landscapes as such. So that would mean you are dealing with the issues of geopolitics, national sovereignty and security. And these are very prime issues. When you get into transboundary landscapes, you have to deal with the states and the state machinery. So, but let me quote Charles Darwin here. I just quoted him in the previous session. Those in the whole history of mankind or animal kind have learned to collaborate or improvise effectively, they will prevail. And that's where the transboundary landscapes start. Collaboration in the mountains where we work and collaboration between the countries, you have to improvise effectively. Mm-hmm. That means you bring in a narrative where the states are clear that these are not those no-no areas, no-go areas as such. These are areas where there are win-wins in the longer run. And time and again, often we see that culture is becoming a very, very entry point for getting into collaborative partnerships with the institutions. But of course, there are these whole issues of how many institutions are there, which are scientific institutions, but have also expertise in cultural management and managing these cooperatives in the landscape, or managing a cross-border interface in terms of festivals and markets. Very, very difficult ball game. You don't get these institutions. And that means you have institutions with different culture. And that is where the challenge comes. You have institution from China, you have institution from India, then you have from Nepal, and then you try to link them together. And there we clearly set a frame that we definitely, my other speakers have really talked about envisioning. And that is the first exercise. And then once you envision, there's very important aspect of growing together. I've been saying also in a couple of other presentations, growing together is very important. And growing together for us means that once we know what state wants, because you get into collaborative partnership by also looking into what does state want from you, so that you choose your institution and look for who can be your collaborative partner, because ultimately, whether these are program supporters or the states, they are looking for impacts of this collaborative partnership. And this leadership which we take. I think that is where it starts. But I must tell you, the transaction costs are very high. They're very high in terms of time. You have to invest in bringing these three countries together, 55 partners together, and talking about the same thing, bringing culture, cross-border interaction and interface or market. All this needs time and resources. And often it's a snake and ladder partnership, because as single standoff on the border will take you back for this collaborative partnership. So as an institute, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, since we have that role of steering and facilitating, we try to use that, definitely the narrative of common win-wins which countries have, and then take that leadership role to bring countries together. I think that's, in a nutshell, I would say, despite the high transaction cost, it's worth doing.
Fantastic. I mean, this region is really fascinating in terms of the geopolitical landscape. And coming to you, Jeremy, FSC has done incredible work. These transactional costs, time, people, energy, human resources. How have you navigated this network in terms of building the collaborations and making sure that it stays together and it, takes the work forward?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, coming from a background in the corporate sector as well as now working for FSC, I think I've seen leadership in different forms, in different situations, and I think this collaborative model is something that is definitely becoming more and more important, and I think more and more business sectors also are certainly seeing that value. So I think it's a must way forward. I think the role of FSC, and I think one of the key factors in building collaborative leadership, is fundamentally about trust. Trust is really the most important aspect, I think, that pulls these collaborations together. And I think this is where FSC certainly has a role to play. I think the key aspects that really drive trust are clarity of a purpose. What is this collaboration trying to achieve, and having really tangible targets for doing so. I think that's something that was mentioned in a couple of the other sessions around having a common focal point. So is it water resources maybe is a key focal point for a collaboration to really work. And I think that transparency also has to exist around that clarity of purpose. So it has to be really clear to everyone in the collaboration what that is leading to. I think communication skills and transparency as well are important. So having a framework, as the FSC is providing in terms of the standards for sustainable forest management, provide that framework from within which to communicate and to have that transparency around what are the different aspects. Competence and confidence are equally important in building trust, and I think having competent and confident organizations collectively working together is essential. And then finally, consistency is absolutely essential too for building that level of trust. And again, having frameworks and systems to work with in the collaborative way that FSC operates provides some of those components. I think one of the great strengths of FSC is its collaboration between the three chambers of the social, environmental, and economic. And I think what we did as FSC was some research into this question of trust, and asked consumers who they trusted and who were the organizations that were trustworthy. And this was in conjunction with an agency called GlobeScan, who've published a lot of very interesting work in this topic. What was really interesting, and the good news, is that scientific institutions, charitable foundations, NGOs, and particularly third-party verification schemes were seen as very trustworthy and credible. The bad news was that the government, international businesses, and the press and the media were not seen as so trustworthy. But equally, all of those groups have to come together. So I think it's the collaboration of those who have trust, those who need to earn trust, that within the FSC system really brings those parties together in a way that can really drive change. And I think that's tough. It's hard work, as you said. It makes for some kind of long processes, but ultimately it's the only way that I think you can succeed, because you have to have that trust that the system is working and that it's not being taken off course by one particular interest group or another.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jeremy. In terms of trust, I think it's important that we recognize the fact that in whatever relationships we're brokering in the networks we work in, it's important to have this as really pivotal to building and collaborating. Dolores, quoting the late Kofi Annan, in his wisdom, he said, "You are never too young to lead, and you should never doubt your capacity to triumph where others have not." You're a young lady from the University of Belgrade, and she is the president of the International Forestry Student Association. In your experience through this work, how do you feel, or where do you see the role of young people and leadership and taking the work forward?
All right. So thank you for that. And a huge challenge that I see that revolves around youth and equal value. We want equal value. Everyone has something to share, and we can only learn if we truly listen. leaving title and ego at the door to have an open conversation of how we are seriously going to achieve the 2020 goals, the 2030 goals, the Paris Agreement, the Bonn Challenge, and so on and so on. There's this idea that in order to experience and create something profound, to make an impact, you have to have years of experience. I'm here to tell you that you don't. Time and time again, we see the work of these young innovators. Thankfully, many of them won't be retiring anytime soon, so they have much more inspiring work to come. Collaborating now can only produce stable, reliable relationships from which we can expand upon. I'm not trying to undermine anyone in this room. The work you have done is inspiring. You're working towards solutions for a greater societal need, and for that, I applaud you. We are not here only because we aspire to be you in the future, but because we want to offer you the pieces of the puzzle that you are missing now. Within our youth organizations, we have already adapted and recognized the importance of a multidisciplinarity, already taking actions, and you can see that with the diverse youth delegation here around you all. We have foresters, we have agriculturalists, ecologicalists, and all other environmentalists. But we also have archaeologists, economists, anthropologists, and all these other sectors. Moving back towards that, and your quote, I think we have to be willing to align and to compromise and think of the much bigger picture. So it's not the title or credit at the stake, it's the planet. When you consider moving towards collaborative leadership, you do it because it's the right thing, or not the new buzzword. You do it because you cannot afford not to. We need to become the risk takers, transcending sectors, generations, because we have nothing else to lose.
Thank you so much. So in transcending these sectors, in navigating these landscapes, I want, starting from the very end, over there, from Plinio, I want one word from you, or two words perhaps. The theme of this Global Landscapes Forum here is from commitment to action. So where do you see, how do you see this being done, in your words? Where should we be moving, which direction should we be moving to get to real action, if we're not there yet?
In 2 words or 3?
3 words, perhaps.
Well, I think that the first things to think about is to have a bottom-up approach. I think that if we want to be successful in action, we need to listen and understand the vision that the farmers, the different stakeholders of a landscape have for their own territory or landscape. Landscape is made of different land use type, forest, forest community, but also oil palm plantation, and all these different land use units are also linked to a very different type of stakeholders. And the collaborative work is all about putting all these people together and try to build up a common vision of the future for this landscape. And then once you have built up this vision, common vision, in which everybody is agreed on that, then you can start actions. But I think that this will also take time, but it's not a wasting of time. You will gain time, and you will also be more successful and more efficient if you build first a common vision with these different stakeholders. This is not an easy task, but it's something that we are trying to do in CIRAD, especially with the restoration projects and programs. And we decided indeed to have this bottom-up approach, trying to solve the problem with the stakeholders, but towards a common vision. So action needs to be planned first, and to, again, have a common vision of this future.
Thank you. Louise?
Well, action is definitely needed from bottom up. I would agree there, but action is also needed from top down, if you like. And if we look at the policies that there are for planification of landscapes, of whole areas, I think one big action that we should take is getting the incoherences out. There are so many perverse policies, things that don't work in the same and in the sustainability direction, that is also a very, very important thing I think that we should do. And basically we should actually test all the policies, whether they're in sync with the SDGs, and if they're not, we should get rid of them. It's really quite simple, I think. And that's something that we need to bring across to all the policymakers at all levels. And also, then again, they can play a leadership role in being positive for their own areas. And we have these examples, for instance, of mayors in Asia that just decide that their whole area will be organic agriculture, and that the landscape that they're living in will be a natural landscape. So these things are really possible, as long as we get rid of incoherences in policies. And then I think one action that we all need to take is that we should have the courage and also the patience to work at a systemic perspective. And unfortunately, we live now in a time where many so-called leaders are looking for simple answers to very complex problems. But these cannot be the solutions. So I think it's also something to us that we take the time and look through the complexity of things and then find our approaches.
Thank you, Louise. Alistair.
I'd agree. I think collaborating openly is vital. But in terms of actually getting an impact on the ground, having a big vision in place and big policies is really important. But when it comes to a decision from somebody with a chainsaw to deforest or convert something into palm oil or to cattle grazing illegally, we've got to understand what's motivating that decision. And usually it's about food or livelihoods or poverty, and it's not necessarily to do with the sourcing policy of a big company or something that we say at the global level. So we have to be able to collaborate widely enough to be able to really understand what is driving those decisions, to be able to take those things happening on the ground and to make change that changes the value of that habitat or that poor practice, so that actions are actually changed and those decisions can be changed. So that involves really listening and really getting people on the ground, building partnerships with people we don't necessarily partner with. It's very easy to traditionally partner with the same people you know. You've got to try and do things differently. We have to shake things up, be disruptive, to really try and get those solutions to those really complicated issues. We wouldn't be here if there was really simple issues to solving landscape problems. We'd have done it already. We've been talking about landscapes for a long time. There aren't silver bullets. The situations are really complicated, and that's why it's hard. So we have to invest time, we have to invest energy, resources, and work with lots of different people to use all those different tools. We have lots of tools, but find solutions that work for individual places, and they're going to be different for each places that we work. And that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, but we need to put that energy in if we are going to have a habitat and nature and places for us to live and food to eat and everything else.
Great, thank you. Disruption. Jeremy.
Yeah, I think picking up on a few of those points, I think the three key areas for me would be common ground and value. So you have to find the common ground that brings everyone together. You have to have something that unites the collaboration to drive things forward in the right way. But there also is a real strong need for the value proposition within that for all the different players in that collaboration. Value has to be there to drive the system and to make sure it keeps going. And I think picking up on the comment about systemic is equally important. It has to flow through the whole system. So it can't be just a point investment in one space that holds something together for a finite period of time, but then falls apart when that investment is removed. It has to have some kind of self-sustaining value cycle inbuilt into that collaboration. And I think that's why it's very important to bring together all the different players who are relevant, including business as a key player in actually finding mechanisms to drive that value so that the right outcomes occur on the ground.
Thank you so much. Rajan.
Yes, I think I agree with other speaker friends. But I do want to highlight, yes, we can go bottom up and create the narrative, but at the end of the day, the political commitment and the decisions are taken somewhere else, whether these are landscape approach-based policies which come from the state, or these are the transboundary cooperation-related policies and strategies which each country develops. So therefore, one of the collaborative leadership which we have understood in our context is really the lawmakers. The lawmakers sit in the parliament, they decide whether we want to continue a kind of a ground level cooperation in different contexts, maybe for regional tourism, maybe for common market, but these are very, very important elements of collaborative leadership because they take the leadership. Once you sensitize them, when you, give those feasibility studies and evidence from the ground, you sensitize them, and then you can bring them together across the 3 countries, across the 2 countries, and also work with them because they are the influencing factors to prepare the policy, to influence the policy at the state level, which then go to the provinces, and finally to those border areas where local development authorities are part of the landscape design and landscape delivery system, whether it's a forest-dominated landscape or watershed. I think we do believe that political commitment and political leadership, which takes the top decisions, they are the crux. And we need to work with them.
Thank you. Dolores, commitment to action.
So to truly collaborate, we must first actually understand one another's personal history. We must first you can only understand their perspective and their reasoning once you understand their history and, most importantly, their why. Why does someone truly believe what they are doing is right? And why are they willing to invest all their energy to progress towards that goal? Any individual project or organization will have personal reason or story as to how they got where they are and where they want to go. Throughout my career and development within IFSA, professionals such as yourselves have always encouraged me to think cross-sectorally and collaboratively. The problems we face are multifaceted, complex, and incredibly diverse at spatial and temporal scales. This builds towards a new style of collaborative leadership. Collaborative leadership means not working only across sectors, but also across generations. Reflecting upon the 1-hour Youth and Landscapes side event yesterday, we have seen how even within a short space of time, the solutions to a similar problem can be so different, which is why it is so important to bring all of these different sectors and different perspectives into what we are doing. We must begin to capture that range of innovation that only the youth can provide, because it is all over the place, and it is constantly fresh. Things happen all the time, spontaneously, and the youth are the ones that are always there and living through it throughout that perspective.
Thank you. Spontaneity, great. I was wondering, can we have the word cloud on the screen? Is that possible? Transparency, community, empathy, listening, love. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you so much for adding all of that together, putting all of that, the importance of science, innovation, motivation. This is really, really fantastic. Bring it on. Keep adding some more words to that. I really just want to thank the panel members for your insight, for your honesty, and really for just getting us to here in terms of why we need to collaborate and why collaborative leadership is so important. And as it says over there, compassion. I think we need to be compassionate in really understanding and really getting a sense of what's actually happening at the community level. If we can give them a round of applause, please. And a round of applause for yourself. Thank you so very much. On that note, I would like to introduce Rhett Butler. I do not know where you are, Rhett. He is the moderator for the next session, so please stick around. And we're going to move off this floor and go down there. Thank you so much.